In today's episode, we're talking about how to use social media to create deeper emotional connections with your fans.
From EngageMint, I'm David Millay, and this is Flip the Switch.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Flip the Switch, where we sit down with leaders in customer experience and employee experience, and we try to figure out what are the trends that they're paying attention to? What are the experiments that they're running? What are the principles that have driven success for them throughout their careers? Then we take all those insights and we apply them to the world of sports and entertainment. Now, today's episode, we are sitting down with Amie Kiehn, who most famously, and where we're going to spend the most amount of time, she was the head of social content and strategy for the Carolina Panthers. Now, with her time at Carolina Panthers, she really took it from the time period where social media was often given to an intern because they're the youngest person, they actually understood social media, to really developing a brand voice and a brand strategy for the Carolina Panthers across all their social media. So she brings a really interesting flavor for how a team and how an organization that's focused on live events can really go out and engage the fan 365 through social media and through really engaging content. So I won't steal too much more of her thunder. Now Amie is doing work with Charlotte FC, but she's also the head of community for Gondola. That's her day job. And she's going to talk to us and explain Gondola a little bit towards the end of the episode and what she's getting into with them. But just know that Amie is a queen at social media and engaging fans through digital content. And so I'm just really excited for all of you guys to hear what Amie has to say, talking about work-life balance, strategy. We cover a gamut of things in this episode with Amie. So without further ado, Amie Kiehn.
Amie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm ecstatic to be here. This is fun.
I'm hyped. We are going to get into a bunch of different things, from lessons and strategies from your time with the Carolina Panthers to kind of your creative process, talking about burnout. We're going to cover a bunch of different things here in this episode. So let's just go ahead and jump in. You were with the Carolina Panthers for a long time. Talk to us about like some of your biggest takeaways from the organization. We'll start broad and then I'll get specific, as we tend to do on this show.
Oh, I like it. Okay, a mile deep, round and a mile wide. I like it. Yeah, I was at the Panthers for 5 years, leading content and our social team, and absolutely loved it. Like, I had the time of my life. But my mom is actually the biggest NFL fan I know. Like, she
Really?
almost got number 4 tattooed for Brett Favre. She's from Wisconsin, loves the Packers. So like she, she was a stay-at-home mom for a bit. And for me to work in the NFL, like it was literally her dream. Like, she came to a few games with me. And so like to able to do that, and it's kind of funny that I have 3 brothers, they're all older, and then I'm the girl, I'm the youngest. And I was the only one that like got to work in sports. So it's so funny to like my mom, like, my brothers all played 3 sports athletes and they were incredible. I was a terrible athlete. Like I had to work so hard to be like the 6th man. So it's so funny that like my career trajectory is like leading social at one of the biggest NFL teams. And oh my gosh, my mom would call me and like send me articles and be like, "Did you see this happen?" I'm like, I tweeted that. So yes, I saw
Yeah,
that
I
happen.
saw it. Wait,
So it was cool.
random question. I mean, we're on this topic. Normally, we don't get into like career path stuff here, but
Yeah.
how if that was the case, I mean, how did you first start working with the Panthers? Like, how did that come to be?
Oh, I love this story. So growing up, I knew like pretty much since like 6 years old that I wanted to work in sports. As I mentioned, like I had 3 active brothers. They all played 3 sports growing up. They're, very close in age. And my parents like waited a long time. And then, oops, surprise, I came. So there's like an 8-year, 10 and 11-year age gap between my brothers and I. And so to keep me occupied, a rambunctious little girl, my mom would always tell me after like after my brother's matches or games to like give her a sideline report, after the game. So we'd be waiting for my brothers in the parking lot and she'd be like, "Okay, Amie Kiehn on ABC, whatever." And she'd be like, "Give us the game recap." And I'd be like, "Hello." Like, and I would just do this all the time. And so when I chose my major in college, it was natural that I was going to be a
Yeah.
sports writer. And I was the football writer at the University of Iowa. And that goes into my first gig in social was after being in Iowa, I was like, you know what? I think I kind of want to go into the movie business. And I cold emailed Ashton Kutcher's production company, and this is in 2009. So I'm dating myself a little bit. And Punk'd was huge on MTV. I
Oh
don't know if you
yeah.
guys remember Punk'd. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And Ashton also was really well known in the sense of like he had just gotten on Twitter. So like he was the first celebrity to have like 1 million followers on Twitter. So like in the social space, he was really big. And I just
Mhm.
remember being like, you know what? I want to work there. So I cold emailed his production company and I used my Iowa email. And, you know, for those that don't maybe know Iowa history, Ashton Kutcher famously was at Iowa for 1 year and dropped out, was scouted by a model and became, you know, the 70s show, etc. So I cold emailed them and they pretty much thought I was his cousin because, you know, coming from LA, you know, LA peeps, they're like, Iowa, okay, they must know each other or something. So my first day there, they're like, hey, great, congratulations. You know, I lived in LA for that summer and they're like, oh, you know, get to meet Ashton, like your cousin. And I'm like, we're not related. We're not related. So that was my first social gig was working for Ashton Kutcher's production company. And one thing I will say is Ashton was literally the nicest person. I didn't like, you know, do anything on his social. It was for his company. But I remember him like coming up to me one day, like in this whole big room, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to get some pizza?" And I was like, who is he talking who's he talking to? He's like, you. And I was like, me? What you want? And he's like, yeah, let's get some pizza. I'd love to talk about you, like, you know, hear your life story. And I was like floored, like to be that, like to feel seen in that way. It was like at like 20, 21, and he was so much fun. I do not keep up with Ashton now. People are like, hey, can you get this script to Ashton? And then after I tell them the story, I'm like, haven't talked to him in years. Hope to maybe one day run into him. But we're not on that level anymore. But maybe I'll tweet at him. So that's how I honestly got started in social, and then took a weird turn. No, not weird, but like I actually became a middle school teacher after my time and working with Ashton. Is I was like, you know what? I think I kind of want to teach, and so I taught middle school with a program called Teach for America for
Mhm.
4 years in Chicago. And then that after that, I was like, you know what? I want to go back into sports. And I got connected at an agency and worked my way back into the Panther world and had been there for 5 years. So that was a long story long. So David, I apologize, but that's who I
You're
am. I'm a talker.
You're so good. I love it. It's going to make for a good podcast. Story time. Story time with Amie. That's what we're going to call. We might call this this episode.
Dig it.
But yeah, no. I mean, it is crazy when you think about it. Just like the impact that I think back to your story of like that parents can have on an influence on their kids. Same thing with mentors on younger, I guess, younger employees, if you will. And I think that is just such a key thing of just like having someone elder that can inspire that confidence in you as you're in your career. And I think we'll get into that a little bit when we start talking about burnout and kind of the great resignation and what that looks like. But
Sure.
while we're on the topic of the Panthers, I do want to hit on this. I mean, I think you have done in your time with the Panthers, you did an incredible job really kind of developing the voice of what the Panthers were, especially when like it was typically a time where like we just give social media to the intern or like the youngest person because they actually know what the heck is going on social media.
Yeah.
You guys really approached it with like wit and creativity, and there was some real strategy behind it. So talk to us about some of the strategies or behind the scenes conversations that you and your team had to really develop that Panthers voice. Because I think a lot of organizations still struggle with that in the sports space.
Yeah. I was really lucky that when I started my career at the NFL, I was under Dan LaTorraca, who is really put sports social on the map. And honestly, that's why I wanted to work at the Panthers. Like, I think I started as a coordinator at the Panthers and I was like 27, 28. So I was like in the older part of my journey. And like, I know some of my friends are like, you've been, you know, a teacher. I was at an agency before that. They're like, why are you kind of like starting again? And I was like, because I really want to learn from Dan. So I give Dan a lot of credit. He kind of set the foundation. And then when he moved on to new things, it was like, all right, good, you got it. You're at control now. And I was like, whoa, this is okay. I got it. And what I tell a lot of people when they like reach out of like, how do I develop a voice and everything is I kind of go back to like, can you can you imagine, a brand account as a human? Like what would that human be like? And so how I kind of developed the Panther side is like, you know what? This this voice that I'm thinking about, like, it reminds me of someone in high school that like was definitely in the cool crowd, but like was the cool person that was like friends with everyone. Kind of gave me the vibe of like Freddie Prinze Jr. from She's All That. Like very much in the know, but people love him. He was already smart. Like he kind of like melded to whatever um what group he was in. So that was kind of the personality that I was going for. And so once I kind of had that, it was super easy. Like we were snarky on the Panther social, but like never too mean. And there's definitely been a few tweets where I was like, "Ooh, this could be a tad mean," and like it would eat me up inside and be like, "Okay, no, that was too far. That was too far." So like I kind of knew where the boundaries were, and so it just made it so easy then to be like, "Okay, I know what we are and what we're not," and so that has been really fun to kind of think about. Like, I'd like to hang out with this Panthers like personality. So once you kind of get that vibe, I really feel like it's a lot easier.
Yeah, I love the practice of saying like what would our brand be like if they were a person? And what would those characteristics be? We're doing some work right now at building out a brand and some brand voice with it, right? And it's I mean literally going through and being like, all right, let's list out what are these specific characteristics. Here's what the tone should be,
Yeah.
and you got to make sure everything's consistent with that though, which I think you guys did a great job on. When you think about how you initially created it, how did that voice evolve over 5 years?
Well, it definitely evolved with like when we had new people join the team, like, and there was like they were also generating copy, creating content
Oh,
because
new internal employees, it changed.
yeah, yeah. I think because once as much as people want to say like this identity, this brand voice has no reflection on the person that's like
Mhm.
tweeting on the social team, they're lying. I think they're lying. Quote tweet me on now. It had to feel authentic. It has to be somewhat of a connection point to whoever's doing it. So like when Astasia Williams and Angela Denaheen on our team, like when they came on, it kind of took elements of who they are and like infused it into the voice. But with the same kind of like middle ground where it's like we're kind of the cool kid in high school that was friends with everyone, the Freddie Prinze Jr. of,
Mhm.
of She's All That. Like as long as that was kind of the middle ground, like we were able to have like kind of sway a little bit. So I do think that the personality of the person does infuse into the voice. So
For sure. When you think about like the voice and like how it evolved, how did you guys prioritize all of the different things that you can cover when you're working with a sports team managing that thing? I mean, you're talking about balancing game coverage, like interest stories on the player, larger content and other activities. I mean, community involvement. How did y'all prioritize posts and the time that you spent in those different areas? I mean, even corporate sponsorship coming to you
yeah.
and saying, "We gotta do this." I mean, how did y'all prioritize that?
So to be on a social team, you have to be a pain in the ass. So let's just start
Yeah,
off there.
what does that mean? Go into that.
So I am in general, I'm a Pisces, I'm an empath, I'm a sensitive soul. And now with that role in the Panthers, I had to say no to a lot of people. And oftentimes I was like probably a little bit more succinct than I wanted to be and like abrupt and be like, no, we're not doing that. So a lot of times that was I had to protect the account. Like, hey, well, the social team can just do this. Like, I wouldn't be in a meeting and then someone would say, yeah, the social team, they'll do that, they'll do that. And I'm like, excuse me, what? Like, we will not do that. Like, no. Um, so I probably got a reputation of like anyone wanting to do any social content at the Panthers, like you should probably talk to Amie before you suggest that. So I know I kind of probably had like a little bit of a reputation, cue Taylor Swift's song, to be a little bit of a pain in the ass. But that's kind of what I feel like good social is you can't be everything. So you have to say no to things. And that is really difficult for a lot of people. But I was lucky at the Panthers that I had one, been there a long time, so I had
Hmm.
longevity.
Hmm.
Two, I had like work to speak of like we had really big outcomes on a lot of like I will not say viral on this podcast. But we had some big moments. Um and so the work showed that like, people like, okay, gee, she knows what she's talking about. So like I didn't really have to like put up too much of a fight. Often, which I was lucky. And so when I talk to young people, I'd be like, you know what? Like you're gonna have to tell people like, okay, what are we? We can't do everything. We can't do every piece of sponsored content
Right.
that comes our way, or we have to tailor it to our voice. And so that's where I say like you're gonna have to be comfortable saying no and being the bad guy. And it's hard. I know I was that for a long time and I didn't always like that about myself, but it did help the account. So I guess it was a martyr needed.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like some of the things that encouraged you or gave you um, the confidence to say no, things that you mentioned were you were there for a long time and you had great work to show. But like
Yeah.
if you're coming in new as a new social manager or new social director, like you don't have those things. I'm gonna say that what you probably need is similar to anybody coming into a new role who has to say no to a bunch of different areas, is you've got to have a leader that is empowering and encouraging you and has your back when you say no.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
that's where people can tend to get discouraged. But if you do go into an organization, if you're considering going into a new organization with this, I mean, that is something I would ask is like, what is the leader like that I'm going to go work for, and how
Oh
much
yeah.
does that person have his other employees' backs, right?
Yeah.
And I
Or
think
her.
that,
Or her.
or her, and that
Mhm.
that oftentimes just like gets way overlooked. I feel like when people are taking
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah.
Um, well, let's talk a little bit more. I mean, you talk about not being able to say yes to everybody. I think the same thing applies with the content that you're creating, being that your fan base is super diverse, and every post that you make is probably not going to please every aspect of the fan base. So, with such a diverse audience, I mean, how did you go about approaching each piece of content? Were you, I can't imagine that you were just creating pieces for the masses and hoping that everybody would love it. Because if you did that, everybody's going to be like, okay on it, right? You might, it's like making eggs and like, all right, if we don't put any seasoning on it, nobody's going to hate it, but nobody's also going to love it. So how did you guys
Yeah.
approach creating content for a diverse audience?
So, a lot of and this isn't exactly to your question, but it is related, so it's tangential. But
Okay.
this may shock a lot of people. I know I mentioned this. I was always scared to mention this to some people in the business, but this is the truth of who I am, and I'm okay with it. I love who I am, and as a leader, I did great things. At the Panthers, this is shocking. We never had a content calendar. Never once did I ever make a content calendar. Ever. I had tried many times. People had asked me like, "Will you just give us a content calendar?" And I would be like, I'd make the template and I just could never do it. Never, ever, ever. And towards the last few years of my time at the Panthers, I just was telling people I'm not doing it. Like I wouldn't even entertain it. I'm like, it's not going to happen. And so with that, why I think that's valuable to share is often I think the success of the Panthers was because we were listening to the community. We weren't like, this has to go on Tuesday because that's when the sponsor said this has to go on Tuesday. Or like, we're just going to put this brand relaunch video on Wednesday at 7 p.m. just because we picked that day. So we really, really were listening to like what was happening on social to respond. Of course, things were planned, like, I'm not gonna say, like, we didn't come up with things, and have them, "Okay, we can go this week," like, that would be ludicrous, but we did really try to listen to the community, like, in each platform, like TikTok, like, what was trending, like, we grew our TikTok at the Panthers so intensely because we didn't post anything because our legal team was like, you can't do this again. And so I was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I have to grow this TikTok account. So Angela and myself who's still at the Panthers leading now, we just started commenting on TikTok. And we were like, okay, we're starting to see this Olivia Rodrigo was about like her driver's license song was just popping off. And so we're like, you know what? We're just gonna experiment. So the Panthers, like on any Olivia Rodrigo mentioned video, like the Panthers commented, and like some of our comments were getting 1 million likes, just the comments, 1 million likes. And it'd be like, why are the Panthers caring about Olivia Rodrigo? Like, why do they care? Like, it's the whole like I don't remember all like Sabrina Carpenter. I hope that's this. I know I'm old, but
I
like
don't know.
there was
I don't know.
drama between like who the
Yep.
song was about
Yep.
and
Yep.
stuff.
Yep.
And they're like, oh my gosh, are they Team Sabrina? Are they Team Olivia? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, blah, blah. Like, and we commented on hundreds of videos. Like, the amount of time, like, at late at night, I'd be like, a 34-year-old woman, like, commenting on these, like, videos is like, I was very invested. But that's how we grew our account. So, like, we always tried to find, like, what was the niche that we could come into. And, like, that was kind of like if I would have been like, this is our brand strategy, we're gonna comment on TikToks and like we're gonna blow up, like people would have been like, okay, weird. Like they wouldn't have gotten it, but like we just kind of realized like we're just gonna experiment. That's what I loved at the time at the Panthers is like, and who I was as a leader is like, let's try this. If it doesn't work, it's not gonna hurt anyone. Like, obviously if it's like big
Totally.
things where it's like tweet like F you, like we're not gonna do that. But like if it's something where it's like, let's experiment, let's not hold so hard to like our brand identity. Let's wiggle a little bit. So that's kind of what I think the magic was and how we were able to take that content thinking and try things on the internet.
I love it. It makes so much sense. So I have to ask this question. I have
Yeah.
not been on the Carolina Panthers TikTok account, but I have
Okay.
seen many comments from you guys. So
Yes.
you guys weren't posting anything at all on the main account, or like very like players, like practices, game. Were you posting anything at all?
We were posting, but nothing was really hitting,
The comments
like
were
we
what
would,
were hitting.
yes, our
Got
videos
it.
were not hitting. It would be like, we'd be like, okay, you guys, this is the one. This is gonna be the Millay one. We're gonna hit off, and like we had this great idea. I know I edited and made a TikTok where I appeared, which is like super out of my norm. But I was like, okay, this is a trend. Let me see. Tanked. Boom. No, nothing. My sensitive soul was hurt on that one, and I was like, okay, I don't know if I can good on TikTok again. But no, we just were trying things, and we realized
Yeah.
like, okay, the comments is where it's at for us. So like, let's do it.
Well, I mean, it is so funny. Like, it's such an easy way. I mean, I would, you'll be scrolling down TikToks, and it is always funny when like someone verified comes in, and everybody's like, "Oh, this person's here," and so for the fact that it's being a team, there was a while too, like over the summer, not to go off on a tangent, where like people would just be like, "Let's see how many NFL teams we can get to comment,"
Yeah.
because I feel like a lot of teams started copying y'all. Like the
Oh yeah.
Lions, the Lions are pretty prolific TikTok
The
commenters.
Lions, I bow down to them. They are incredible. They are a TikTok dream.
They do a great job.
I kind of stopped. I'm not gonna like shout him out, but I am. But Neil on the Lions team, like go follow him. I think it's Larson is his last name. He's a gem. Like I can't get enough of their TikTok. I called him one day. I'm like, just tell me how you do it. Tell me how you do it. He's like,
That's
who
too
are
funny.
you?
Wait, what's his name? Katie will find his Twitter handle and put it in the show
Yes,
notes.
I think it's Neil Larson. I
Neil
hope I'm
Larson.
right.
All right, we'll link to it. Maybe we'll get him on the show at some point.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift a little bit towards this. I mean, obviously we're talking about TikTok, and TikTok blew up during the pandemic, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we've talked to a number of marketing leaders about some of the lessons learned about fans during the pandemic. And there was kind of this shift, right, where everybody was so focused on game day experience. And then when events went away, we realized we still have fans and they still want to interact with us, but we now have to find a new way to interact with these fans. And so everybody just seemed to double down, triple down, quadruple down on content. So I'm curious on your end, like as a creator, how did your role change during the last couple of years to really meet that desire for more access and more content?
So we were really lucky that I think for any team to make good content, I think there's got to be good content chemistry. So like we were very lucky at the Panthers that like we all were really good friends. So like when it came down to like we were working at home and we needed to make content, like our number one goal was to like make each other laugh on the content team. And if we're like, okay, if we're making each other laugh, maybe this would be good on the team account. And that's kind of what I hint at a little bit of like not having a content calendar because it gave us wiggle room to be like, what can we do this week? What can we play around with today? And people, especially at the Panthers, every boss has like sayings that people quote back to you. And I think mine was always like, let's try it. Like, and they always would be like, let's try it. So that would always be like my Slack comment when they're like, hey, I have this funny meme idea. I'm like, let's try it, But that's seriously how it always was. It was like, make it. And if it lives in the content graveyard, oh well. But at least like we're trying and we're doing things. I think a lot of people get stuck in like the thinking phase, like the strategy.
sure.
Gotta have the strategy, and they haven't even made it. So I also like Megan Julian, who leads social at the Chargers, like the Los Angeles Chargers, like her and I have a lot of similar thinking, and they make weird stuff. It's not like the most perfect always designed template. It's like weird and quirky. And I think that's what also like we kind of chimed in on of like, hey, it didn't have like the cool, like it didn't use our logo. Like we just made this on Instagram story, or like, we did something in Microsoft Paint. Like we just tried to have fun with it. So I think that's what kind of helped our content. And one of our biggest videos ever when I was at the Panthers was during the pandemic. And it was making fun of the Atlanta Falcons, who's a rival of the Panthers, their jersey. I remember our like VP called me one day. This is like March, right in 2020. And he's like, I want to make fun of the Falcons' New Jersey release. And I was like, oh, I don't know if teams do that. And he's like,
rare that a VP's calling to say something like that, but cool.
Yes. And I was like, he's like, come up with ideas by noon. And it was like 9:00. And I was like, okay. So I sent a message to the content team, and we had a Slack channel in our Slack where it was called memes, where we would basically, it was just like a select few of us where we just would send memes back and forth, and like we'd come up with cool ideas. And Brandon Johnson, our videographer at the time, was like, you know what, the jerseys kind of remind me of this Adam Sandler movie, The Replacements. And we were like, yes, let's go there. I was like, okay, send me something by noon. And he's like in his house or in his apartment, he's like a young dude. And he got an inspo from a TikTok video, and he made this video making fun of the Falcons jersey, as like saying it was like Adam Sandler and in The Replacement. And I sent it to my boss, and he was like, great, go for it. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't think that would happen so fast. I was like, okay, and I right before I tweeted it, I usually don't get super nervous, but I was like, okay, this is risky, like not in a bad risky, like controversial, but it was like, I don't know, like we could get roasted real bad. Like I was thinking of like how the Falcons could come back at us. I was like, oof, this is not good. I don't know. So we tweeted it, and it was one of those tweets that like in the first 7 seconds it had like 1,000 retweets. I was like, holy shit.
You're like, this is it.
Yes. And I think it ended with like 60,000 retweets, and like all of us are like, it was first month at home really, and all of us are like, oh my god, boy, we did that at home. And so that was like a really good energizer booster. But just how random is that? It's literally filmed in his kitchen, like this young dude apartment in Charlotte, like, and it popped off. So the internet's so weird, and they reward weirdness, I think.
So do you feel like, I mean, again, over the pandemic, like your role as a creator, I mean, do you feel like do you feel like the team leaned more on you to engage with than ever before? And like you mentioned your VP called you, like we're senior leaders now taking it more seriously or leaning into it more. I mean, how did you, and I'm going to get into the weirdness and like your favorite post here in the next question, but I mean, do you feel like there was more demand on you in the last couple of years because of that?
Oh yeah, we were the connection point to your audience, your fans,
Right.
your customers, your future fans, your rambunctious avid fans. So 100%. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier of like learning how to say no. It's like now your social channels are really, besides email, your only communication. to your audience, and it's like, let's communicate everything. I was like, oh no, we're taking a step back. Like we're not doing that. I know like a few times we're like, you know what, we should probably do a messaging about like how people should wear their masks around. And they're like, we'll just put up like a graphic that's like, wear your mask. And we're like, oh, no, 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 we don't, no, we don't, well, that's important. We're not going to do it like that. So again, our content team was like, okay, we'll come up with something. And we did this hilarious video. And I hope it's not one of those things where like, I think it's hilarious and people watch it and they're like, oh no, but I really do think it's funny. Um, of like this mashup meme of like people like in situations and then we put a mask over them and like that's the kind of stuff that like we're gonna take your messaging but like we're gonna tailor it to our voice.
Yeah.
And that really comes down, I think you said earlier, of like we had great leadership. Like they were like, we want to keep the social team doing their thing. So like they kind of gave us permission to be like, like you can say no, maybe not say like hell no, but like you
hmm
say no in a gently way. Um, but we really did have like good buy-in, which is so nice to have.
I love it. Well, now when we think about, I mean, you mentioned both of these posts that were great. I mean, what was your favorite post in the last 5 years? The favorite piece of content that you created, and why? I mean, you guys
Well,
have created tons of posts.
that's really nice. I would say it's really a time for a lot of our schedule release videos that I've had literally like zero like physical involvement in. I was just kind of being like, oh, this is a cool idea. Let's go for it. So I was not the one. If you had me edit something, Lord knows, like, oh, you wouldn't ever post it. But Carson Smucker, who was with the Panthers for a really long time, now is kind of like doing his own thing. He is like I hate when people say like a wizard, magician, guru, but like I almost did that, so I apologize, Carson. He knows I always like, don't call me a guru. Um, he is fantastic. His skills are off the charts, and he always came up with great schedule release idea videos, which is like a big moment in the NFL. So I would say any of our schedule release videos that Carson and his
Okay.
team led were like so much fun. Like he knows how to do After Effects like nobody's business. So I would give shout outs to them. And I was just kind of the one that's like, let's go, we got it, we got it. So um I was a cheerleader.
I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about the creative process. I mean, we've already started dabbling into that, especially like even having a Slack channel dedicated for memes and being able
Yeah.
to hop off and take inspiration for things like that. I'm, when you think about the creative world and what the rest of the front office, how they view you guys, I mean, what are some of the most misunderstood aspects of the creative world in your mind, especially within the sports and entertainment industry?
I think from the leadership corporate level and not specifically talking about the Panthers, just like in general
hmm
leadership, the C-suite level, is that like you can schedule creativity for like an hour block and be like, okay, cool, like they'll come up with something. Um, Very rarely did that happen. Any meeting that I had with anyone that we came up with something, it was, I mean, it must have been like a lightning hit us, and we're like, oh, okay, now we got the great idea. But like, it was once in a blue moon. That's why I talk a lot. Like, my team is like, I tried to have like good boundaries, but like, we would text really late at night. Like, sometimes, like, I know one of our fun ideas, like, Drake had his album come out, and I'm not cool, so I don't remember it, but it was one where they had the pregnant emoji on it, and the
Yep.
team said like, "Hey, can we do this?" And it was like 11 o'clock at night, and of course they already knew I was gonna say like, "Mock it up," and they had already mocked it up, and they're like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Sure, go for it." Like, and if it doesn't hit, like, just delete it. That was kind of my philosophy, and like, so like, we talked all the time. So I don't really feel like a lot of people realize that like how much like to do at a high level, come up with creativity is you kind of, I don't want to say always on, 'cause that sounds kind of boring, but like you're always looking out for inspiration, and it doesn't always happen at the times that we think it's going to happen. Like I wish sometimes the executives be like, well, she should just work less if she's unhappy. Like, excuse me, like, I'm so sorry, but life happens all the time. The internet happens all the time. Like I can't just turn it off. Like if we want to come and be like that heavy hitter, like it may come at like when Drake releases an album at like midnight one night.
Right.
Like,
Right. Well, I mean, that is a whole nother thing that we're about to get into here soon, is like this expectation of leaders to just be like, oh, just work less. But if you in a role like this where you're creative, you have to be thinking about it all the time. It's really hard to just shut your brain off and still be good
Yeah.
during the hours
Yeah.
when you're supposed to be good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hit on this just around the creative process. There was a tweet that you shared recently that I thought was incredible, which was, creatives are some of the best brand builders out there. We're going to see a more prominent feature of social media teams being not just the voice of the brand, but influencers themselves. And I think this ties into some of what you're talking about like, it's not like I can just go into a meeting and be creative. I myself have to really be invested in this and be a part of the thing. And I have to be thinking about social all the time. So talk to us a little bit about that tweet that you had, and maybe expand on that a little bit.
So I really do believe that we're coming into this point now in social and in content creation, that like those who make the content are your influencers. Like, and influencers was often reserved for like the Kardashians or like other big fitness influencers with a million followers. Well, um, I know this is gonna sound like arrogant. I'm not trying to make it arrogant, but like I myself am coming to the point that like I'm an influencer, right? Like other people are influencers. You, David, are an influencer,
We
right? Like,
only have influencers on this podcast, so
yeah,
you have, if you weren't an influencer
yeah.
before, you are now.
Oh my gosh, don't make this the first soundbite. But I don't like I feel like you're not an influencer. Okay, thank you. I was just trying to be like nice about myself for a second. Uh but I content creators are going to they're your brand ambassadors. Like, so often it was like thought of like, especially on the team side, and I know I've been guilty of this as a manager, of like our content should really at one point I had to think, our content should remain on our channels. Like we don't want anything to monopolize that. And now, like in the last few years, I could care less about that. If the content is being seen and your brand is being out there, that's amazing. I'm taking the David like the NBA David Stern even model of like the NBA. Let the content go. Like they want people on YouTube making mashups, highlight videos. So like I want to do the same thing and at my role, and even like today I want to encourage young people, like share your work. Do it. Like, obviously you have to find out like where the sandbox is for your organization or your team or whatever. Because you don't want to be the one that's being like, brought into the office, like, let's talk about your personal Twitter. Like, been there. I've
Yep.
totally been there. But I feel like we're at this point where like now we want people to share their work, share who they are, because that makes people excited about like when they see the
For
content.
sure.
I know Charlotte FC, they had their big inaugural match. They're an MLS team here in Charlotte. And one of their content creators, who's their team photographer, Taylor, like she posted right after the match, like that she had an all women photography team. And I
Too
was
cool.
like, hell to the yeah. And like
Yeah.
Together posted it. Like I think even like maybe like MLS, the league posted it. Like people were stoked. And that made me, when I saw the photos from that night, being like, oh, that was a woman photo. Hell to the yeah, I'm gonna like it. I'm gonna like that. Like,
Yeah.
so it almost empowers the content behind it. So I'm totally a fan. I know not everyone has that mindset. I would gladly give leaders in positions of influence like my email, my Twitter. We can hash it out together because I've been there. I know where their viewpoints are. Happy to speak from the other side. So that's my
Yeah.
2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time on the show, of just like, if you're going to connect with fans and really build deep emotional connections, what connects with people today is personality. And the easiest way to infuse personality into your brand is, yes, you can go through the exercise and say, what would our brand voice be if we were a high school? Or you can just get the high schoolers on there with the personality to be pushing out your content. And like,
Yeah.
and we talk about that all the time. Like, one thing that I've always kind of gone back and forth with, and haven't until recently like really figured out, is like, as the head of engagement, like what should come from our engagement channels versus what should come from my brand, and balancing those two things, right? And that's an interesting dichotomy as well. And I think it's easier when you're with a bigger organization. This is just, now I'm just venting my personal struggles, but alas, let's move on out of there. But I do think you're right, like around being able to have the NBA model where the views don't really matter. What matters is actual engagement and dollar spend and time spend with your brand. Share of
Yeah.
heart and share of wallet. Likes and
Ooh,
social posts don't
your
actually
name,
matter.
that's a quote. You better quote tweet that later.
We'll
Damn,
clip it.
good.
Katie, clip it.
Yeah,
Clip it.
clip it,
Um,
clip it.
anyway, and so like I mean I think back to MLB BAM and when they put all the paywall or the gates up and nobody could share their
Yeah,
content. I mean, that was to
yeah.
drive more engagement to their channels, but it's like, what does that really matter? Like, if nobody's talking about your brand, that's what matters at the end of the day. So, how do you disperse it? Anyway, let's move into. We only got a few minutes left here. I want to move into this kind of balance between work and life, and something that we end up working on a lot here at EngageMint with organizations is kind of employee experience and how we think about hustle culture in sports. We're not dedicating nearly enough time to this topic right now in this conversation, but
I know
uh,
I'm chatty.
well, I know you've got some specific takes. Specifically, when you went through your pregnancy, you were thinking about scheduling. If I heard this right, you were thinking about scheduling your C-section around and your procedure around the social posts. So, talk to us about your take on that and that experience. Give us the full story for anybody that hasn't heard it.
Yes. So, trigger warning, this is not like it's a happy story, but it's a traumatic story. I actually was not like, it wasn't like a, yay, I get to schedule my C-section. It was like, hey, you're giving birth 2.5 months early. Like, good luck. It was really a very terrifying week of my life. I just went into a routine visit with my doctor and like a couple, I was pregnant with my son at 27 and weeks, and they're like, just a routine. And I'm like, hey, I just, at the end of the appointment, I had just mentioned like, hey, I haven't gotten like that cool baby bump. Like, I want to take my photo, like, selfishly. And they're like, oh, okay. So they checked it out and they're like, oh, you need to give birth ASAP. And I was like, oh, I don't think you understand. I have a game on Sunday that I need to go to. They're like, you're not understanding this is an emergency. I don't think I was probably in shock a little bit. So gave birth to our son on Saturday night, scheduled that appointment, and because I was trying to keep him in as long as I could, but they were like, he's ready to come out, and he was really really tiny. He was only 1 pound and 3 ounces when he was born, and we had a long journey. And that I thought he'd be home sooner than he was, and so I went back to work, and the Panthers were really great about everything. To be honest, people ask me like, how did you do everything with that? And I'm smiling now because I'm really proud of myself that like, and also kind of sad, but I just did. Like, I didn't think about what I was doing, I just did. And hindsight, I think I probably should have like maybe taken a step back a little bit to like understand what was happening with our lives. And but I'm very lucky that our son, he had a year in the hospital, but he's now home and he's doing great. And he still has some challenges like anyone, but like um, he's practicing being a comedian at 3. Like, he is already the class clown and he hasn't even entered school. And so I'm concerned about my future in terms of like how many parent teacher conferences calls I'm gonna have. Cause already at 3, he's hysterical and he doesn't really talk that much. So it's even funnier. Um, but yes, I definitely was trying to navigate being a mom, working at the level that I wanted to work. And to be honest, for a long time, for 3 years, like that, I worked the Panthers while I was, my fiance and I were raising our son. Really, a lot of it for my fiance because I was working those crazy hours that like a lot of it felt to him that's kind of where my transition from full time at the Panthers to like now in this new role at Gondola, like I was like ready for a change. I was ready for some flexibility, ready for being not the person that everyone called when an emergency needed to happen or like something needed to get posted or tweeted. And so I was ready for kind of to be a little bit on the side and do something new, which was what I really love, which is like the thing I think I excelled at the most at the Panthers was building a good creative community. And I wasn't always good at that. I love to like note to people that like I really sucked as a manager for a lot of years. And so I had, one of my direct reports, Anastasia, would be like, you're kind of not doing so good. Like, let's evaluate this. And she spoke a lot of good truth in me that like I had to take a lot of like
What
really sitting with to understand how to be a better manager. So,
what made her say that you weren't doing so good?
oh, I was so bad. So bad.
Why do you
She,
say that? Why do you say that? Give me
oh,
specifics.
I think I thought I was this like cool boss, like, someone that like was inclusive and like was really empowering, but I was a micromanager, number one, super micromanaging. I'd be like, what, like I'd be like to the T, I'd be like, it has to have this emoji. Like, Amie, it does not need to have that emoji that you thought of, like things like that, way too much. And I thought I was like being like, "Okay, whatever you need, I'm here for you." And then when they would express what they need, I'd be like, "Actually, this is what you need." So, not a good listener. So, really had to be introspective on that, and then went through a lot of tears, and trying to be a better manager. And I think when having my son and just kind of life changing as it should in general when you have a child, like I think I learned how to um be the leader that I know that I would excel with, which was someone that was like actually encouraging, not judgmental, like someone that really wants to make the individual succeed. And everyone's going to succeed in a different way. So you have to cater your leadership and your management style to like,
For
some
sure.
people need hands on, some people are like, leave me alone and just give me like the thumbs up. And I'd be like, okay, good, you're great. Like, and I really wouldn't like interfere too much. And so, and that to
Yeah.
answer your question, that's kind of what I had to do a lot of introspection.
Well, and maybe we'll close with this piece of advice. I do want to just hit on a little bit about what you're doing now with Gondola because I think that aspect's really cool, especially in the
Yeah.
creative space. But as we, I, I see it firsthand here. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my brother's company, Rooted Creative, and I've started helping them with some more strategy aspects and things. And it's really interesting because as I get into this more creative space, you really start to see how creatives take their work home with them. They have to constantly be thinking about it. But as you start to get a life, so to say, as a creative and other things start to come in, the burnout can really weigh heavy on you. So when you think about giving advice to other senior leaders, I mean, what advice would you give to other senior leaders managing creatives, working with creatives to help really retain and to help retain creatives?
Yeah, I think the first step in anything, right, is to speak human to human. Like, let's try to drop some of the corporate jargon that we've adopted of like, are your values aligned? Like, like all these terms that we use, like work-life balance, which is like non-existence. Let's stop using the phrase. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, you have to, if you kind of talked about the new phase of work that we're in, the great resignation, maybe the great, reprioritization, if I said it right, is people want to have a full life and they want work to be a complement to that. So that's what I think we're kind of entering in. So the best leaders I know, and I want to give a shout out to what Nick Kelly has been doing. He's the Panthers and Charlotte FC's
Yep.
new team president. And since day one in our interaction, he's always talked to me human to human. Like, like he was always like, "Hey, what do you need?" Like, and I'd be like, I would be honest because that's who I was at the point I really became confident in myself. I'd be like, "This is what I need." And he's like, "Okay, that makes sense. Like, let me see how I can help you with that." Like, it was
Mm.
never like I need to like bring it up the chain and see if it's aligned with this box that we have in HR. I'd like boom, 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 or like, see if the marketing team like he was always like, "Amie, what do you need to be successful?" I can't even say that word. "Amie, what do you need to be successful?" And I think he's a fantastic leader, and I really want to give him props and make sense why, he recently got promoted to a big overall role, and that's because he really does get it. He's someone that like gets it, as we say in biz. So that's
I,
that's kind of what I would say.
I love to hear it. Well, as we think about closing here, I do want to get into your new role that you're in with Gondola. So
Yay!
give us a plug for what you're doing there, and some of the biggest takeaways that you've already had in the short time you've been there.
Ugh, Gondola is a dream. It's an online portfolio for creatives in any type of business. Doesn't have to be in sports, can be in social, film. You can be a makeup artist. Like a way to organize and track their work and take credit for it. It's kind of like the IMBD of social. Oftentimes I see cool things on the internet. I'm like, I wonder who made that. And what we're doing with Gondola is creating a space where people can credit themselves and also organize all of their work. I know I get reached out to a lot of like, hey, do you know anyone that's like up and coming in social? And I'd be like, I kind
Totally.
of know the same people. We're Gondola right now. You can be like, oh, here's all the people that have done social media work. And like, you can actually see what they did. Because oftentimes, like when you see a brand account, you're like, I don't know who exactly tweeted that. You're kind of guessing. With Gondola right now, you can know exactly who was involved in a certain post, and like
That's
they,
so cool.
it's amazing. And Jared Clementine, who's the founder of Gondola, him and I have been friends for years. He actually led sports and international at Vine, RIP, and he is one of the best leaders. And when we talk about like what I answered earlier, like he truly is someone that's like an empathetic, responsible leader. Like that's ultimately why he was like, "Hey, would you ever want to join me in Gondola?" And he's like, what would it take for that to happen?" And I was like, "Well, I need flexibility. I'd like to do this." And he's like, "Done." He's like, "I just care about you and like let's make sure that like you are your best self to help our creative community." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice. It's a so I'm really, really lucky. I absolutely love what I'm doing. A lot of my friends like call me now and like, you're so energetic. Like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, I know, I'm just like so happy. Like, I'm happy in this new role. I'm happy with my family. Like, feels like amazing. So like to radiate that like on calls with people, it's so exciting. And Jared and Gondola, it's like a huge reason why.
I love it. And I do like this was not a leadership podcast episode, but
Mhm.
we have hit on so many great leadership things. I mean, when it comes
Yeah.
to just retaining creatives, like you talk about the founder that you're working for now and like the
Yeah.
role that that person had and giving you the confidence to move into that role and the
Yeah.
energy that now you're getting for it. And you've brought up his name multiple times here. So it's like
Yeah.
the role that a leader can play in being able to keep creatives, attract best
Yeah.
talent, like it's so key. So
Yeah, you're
um
sounding like
what
me and rubbing off on you.
Amy, any final pieces of advice? Where can people follow along your journey, hear your thoughts, interact with you?
Well, I'd say the first thing is not a pitch because I'm not a salesperson, but like I really, really love what we're building on Gondola. So first, Gondola Social is on Gondola. And it's like the gondola from the ski resorts that you go run, like you ride them together. They're awesome. And we're gondola.cc, like gondola.creative community. And you can find me on social. My name is AMIEKIEHN. You're welcome to DM me. I may not always respond as I tell people like I've got a life. So sometimes I'm delayed on that. And as Katie knows who's on your team, like I'm also delayed in email. So I'm working on that. I'm working on my speed, but sometimes I'm like, I don't. You talk so much online, you're like, I just want to relax. So,
I feel
but
that. I
that's
feel that.
but that's me, and I love absolutely love talking and helping people, especially young women. So if you ever reach out, I will make sure I reply to you. So hey, that's me. Thank you guys so much. I had a blast, as you can tell.
It's been an awesome last hour, Amy. Appreciate you coming on the show. And for everybody listening, thanks so much for tuning in. Amy, we'll talk soon. And everybody listening, see you next week. Hey guys, before you head out, just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That helps more of your peers find the show as they search for ways to get better in their own roles. But this podcast is just a small part of what we do at EngageMint. In our normal day in the office, we're crazy focused on helping athletic departments and sports and entertainment companies generate more revenue by becoming more customer-centric. To see how we might be able to help your organization, visit engagementpartners.com to learn more. Download a free guide, check out our blogs and case studies, or schedule a call with us if you want to see how we can help with your particular objectives. Our goal is to help you create deeper connections with fans and generate more revenue. So when you're with us, hopefully you find a nugget or two that helps your cause.